there, fellow YouTubers. It's Frank Bush here again. So I'm just out doing a recording of a separate video from this one entirely, but I thought I'd stop and kind of break this off and do it off as a separate video entirely. And in this video I'm going to show kind of the simplest do-it-yourself off-grid electrical supply. So I'm going to walk through kind of some just really basic components that you'll need if you want to be able to charge devices, run lights, and cook food when you're out in the field, and how to do it without kind of breaking the bank, if you will. Yeah, I know some of that technology that exists on the market can get really expensive. So in this video I hope to show kind of that stuff, and I'll show you, really bare bones basic essentials to achieving off-grid power. Yeah. So the first thing I'll talk about is you're going to need to have a good, solid, reliable battery supply that'll last a long term if you plan on being off-grid for an extended period of time and want to have electrical usage 24 hours a day. In future videos and in some past videos, I'll show how you can do electrical systems that don't involve a battery, but they're really sun dependent. Whereas having a battery is critical if you want to have 24-hour operations of your camp and you're wanting to have reliable power as you move through time. The good people over at LiTime sent me over this mini 100 ampere hour battery to review in a previous video, and I did that review and I was really impressed. So I've now decided to bring this battery out into the field to use it as part of the example. As I see it, this is one of the better batteries that exists on the market, to be quite honest. So like I say, this is a lithium iron phosphate battery. These are designed to give you daily use of full power for years and years on end. When you're talking like a sealed lead acid or something, you're lucky if you get 3 to 5 years out of it. Half the charge will be gone after the first couple of years, and then it'll just be declining performance, and you're not able to get 100% out of the battery without causing the battery damage. Whereas with lithium iron batteries, lithium iron phosphate batteries like this LiTime battery, you can get thousands and thousands of use of. There's been lots of situations where people have used batteries like this for well over 10 years of daily use, where they're pulling 80, 90, 100% of the power off the battery and still have ample usable power at the end of that period. It's really calendar life that's going to kill these batteries more than anything else, unless you're intentionally malusing them. But like I say, I see it as a battery is a critical kind of heart of the component. This mini is great for when you're going kind of mobile off-grid and that kind of stuff, because let's be honest, the less you have to pack in, the better. So I'll switch camera angles now and I'll start showing some of the other components that you can use in a very minimalistic off-grid, cover your basics kind of power construct. Yeah. Okay, so one of the first things I want to talk about are these little units here. So these are cigarette lighter adapter units. You can buy them off Amazon or eBay, that kind of thing. They're really cheap. They're not expensive units. I recommend spending a couple bucks and getting the high quality ones that got the thicker cables. The thicker the better in that regard. They can just handle the higher amps. But these are really simple units that really, like I say, just have a cigarette lighter adapter as the output, and you just hook them directly onto battery terminals. They have a fuse built into them, inline fuse here. So, even if you had a handful of fuses in a little bag that you're bringing out in the field with you as well, it's a way to kind of keep this thing going for an extended period of time. But these are really simple units. I'll just get this up and running so we can start to show some of the examples. Yeah, I'm trying to stay out of the camera as quick as, or as best as I can, but given that we're out in the field, life happens. But I'm connecting the red to the red, and then there's a black one. Connect the black to the black side. And just as simple as that, this thing is hooked up and ready to go. And I can use this now for multiple purposes. And to give you an idea, it's you can hook up to about 3 of these little cigarette adapter units onto a single battery. I wouldn't recommend going above that without going out into a fuse box and that kind of thing. But for simple off-grid stuff, you could hook 3 of these up and have multiple things running at the same time. In a future video also I'll talk about charging these and putting power back into them when you're out in the field. But in this example I wanted to focus more just on the I want to be able to run lights, charge devices, and cook food. How can I do that as simply as possible, yeah? So let me just grab another component I have, and we'll start to walk through, getting the functionality off-grid that you would want, yeah? So give me 2 seconds and I'll cut back. The next unit I have here is, and you can pick these up for cars. They're very common for car accessories, but it's a little USB, or sorry, a little cigarette lighter adapter, AC out, and it's got a USB out on here. So if I want to power devices, and you can get these in a plethora of different kind of types. You can get them with 3 and 4 USBs if you wanted to focus on that as your output and that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to show this as kind of a generic example. You can get these where there's 2 ACs out and they can go up to 150 watts. I have one back at the house, but then just use this as part of the example of, and it's easy enough to turn around and you just plug this unit in. A little green light lights up. I don't know if the camera is going to see that okay. A little green light lights up. And then I can simply just hook up my, USB devices. I'll just take my phone as the example. And as you can see, taking a charge. So if I wanted to have more kind of USB charging capacity, I would want to, go with one of these that has multiple USB heads on it and that kind of stuff, yeah? And if I'm more wanting to have AC up and running, to have shavers and that kind of stuff, it's easy enough to go that way as well. Like I say, these are only small little AC inverters, and they're not considered the most efficient in the world. They're only 75 watt inverters. But when you're out in the field, you're not normally consuming large amounts of power. But like I say, these kinds of devices, they're simple, they're cheap, you can pick them up. The ones that are just for cars to charge USB and stuff, you can get those in gas stations and everything. They're commonplace now, yeah, and they're only cheap, not, $10 items, if you will. You can get fancy ones that are a little bit more expensive, but we're talking cheap stuff here. I want to keep this all on the minimal, if you will, right? And but as you can see, easily enough to be able to charge devices, and you'd be able to do that for an extended period of time given the depth of the charge of these batteries. These LiTime lithium iron phosphate 100 ampere hour batteries, they hold 1,280 watts worth of power. It's a substantial amount of electricity, and would be able to charge this phone dozens and dozens of times before it would run out of power. So you don't have to worry too much about whether you were charging small devices like this, yeah? But I'll shift gears now and I'll talk about lighting systems, yeah? So let me just kind of adjust the camera again, and I'll pull out some lights and we'll kind of talk about those as well. So you can have lighting around your camp when the sun goes down, that kind of stuff, yeah? Okay, so I just shifted the camera angle, try to get kind of a cleaner lighting system here. I know when I'm in the forest, lighting is always an issue. But speaking of lighting, so I just disconnected my cell phone that I had hooked up that I was charging with this device. And now on the market, without wiring anything differently or anything, I'm still using this little adapter plugged into the cigarette lighter, and it's nothing complex. They've got all sorts of options now that exist on eBay and Amazon and those kinds of places where you can get these, and these are USB based lighting systems, and you can get them varied cords and varied lengths and all that stuff. And I've shown these in examples in previous videos, but when it comes to their energy efficiency, hopefully you're seeing that okay, throws a half decent light. It's not super bright, but at nighttime it's enough to definitely light up a shelter, if you will, and that kind of thing. And if you had more than one USB plug, you'd obviously be able to run more than one USB light. But to give you an idea, these things are, I think this version specifically is only a 3-watt light bulb. So to give you an idea, you're talking, if I ran this for 100 hours, I'm only going to feed roughly 300 watts off this battery, which is a quarter of the battery's use. So hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of how long you could keep a lighting system going without even having to recharge it or anything else with this kind of construct. Like I say, these are very, very efficient lights. They use minimal energy. Now in previous videos, I've also shown examples of using USB hypochlorous acid generators and using fire starters that were USB based. So in my lens, as soon as you move into a USB realm, it opens up the doors to being able to do things like this without having a lot of extra equipment. You can start to run lights, easily get fires going with the USB fire starters, easily purify water if you use a little salt in water, and the hypochlorous acid generator. I talked about that in detail in previous videos, and a lot of the stuff I'm mentioning here I've mentioned in previous videos, but I just wanted to kind of show of there's not much more to this other than the wire and a little bit of gear. You know, I'm holding it all easily in one hand. Other than the weight of the battery and getting that into the field, the level of functionality I'm able to achieve with just this simple of a setup really steps it up a notch when it comes to how well can I sustain myself off-grid and still have a lot of creature comforts. So I'll stop now, and like I say, I just wanted to show the quick example of, and if I wanted to run all these things, I'll stop and kind of caveat this. If I wanted to run all these things at the same time, I could easily have, you know, 3 of these cigarette lighter adapters hooked up, and a couple of these where I had one was running lights, the other one was just there for charging devices, and the other one's there for cooking food and that kind of stuff. And I'll show that as part of the next example. Yeah, so let me shift camera angles and shift gears and stuff, and we'll move on to the next example. But as you can see, that covers kind of charging devices and covers lighting in a very, very elementary way. Yeah, so like I say, let me shift camera angles and we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so I just pulled off my little micro AC inverter that we had plugged into the cigarette lighter adapter, so we're literally just back down to this. Yeah, now they've got lots of cooking devices that exist on the market, and I've shown a lot of these in previous videos as well, where they have a built-in fuse that exists right into them for their own safety, so they don't blow or any of that business, but they're cigarette lighter plugs. So I can simply plug this in to the cigarette lighter adapter, and as you can see, hopefully the camera's seeing this, green light picks it up, and it's just that simple. This pot's working and going now. So I'm just going to turn around and get my lunch going. What do we got today? Spicy Thai chicken. So that's what I'm having today, people. Some spicy Thai chicken. I'm really, like I said, I'm out doing an actual separate bushcraft, or well, ropecraft video to be more precise. And I thought I'd just stop and kind of show all this stuff while I'm out in the field and making myself lunch, right? So just that simple, you know. In about half an hour's time, this will be simmering and ready to go. So I'll stop because I've got to start to get things ready for that separate bushcraft video that, or ropecraft video that I was talking about. So I'll just stop and let this kind of cook off for a bit, and I'll cut back when we're closer. But as you can see, we were able to charge devices, get a lighting system up and running, and cook food, all off of this minimal setup. You know, there was nothing to it. This is stuff you could easily pack in off-grid and use. Now, like I say, because I haven't talked about any way of recharging this battery, I'm going to do that off as a separate video. I'm going to touch base about kind of options about charging this up and how you move forward when you're off grid. But that stuff is really elementary as well. But like I say, I'll just push that off to a separate video, and hopefully you can see that the steam is already starting to form a little bit on the insides there. But yeah, as you can see, I've covered charging devices, giving me a lighting system, and cooking food, and all of it separate from the battery. All of it with less than $100 worth of stuff. You know, most of this stuff is relatively cheap. I think this pot was 40 or 50 bucks that I picked up off eBay or Amazon, one of the two. I can't remember, I got it a few years ago. But either way, you can see, if you do want to kind of have off-grid power systems, you know, we're not talking about heating your shelter and that kind of stuff. We're talking about just giving you creature comforts to be able to power things and run devices and run lights and that kind of stuff, and be able to cook food at a very simple elementary level. And this LiTime 100 ampere hour mini battery, to me, is a perfect example of a workhorse of a battery that you could use when you're off grid, and that'll supply decent amount of power to be able to run all of this stuff. To give you an idea, this unit is using about 120 watts per hour. I could cook food in this non-stop for about 10 hours before this battery would need to be recharged one time, you know. And when that comes to, well, how much food could I cook in that regard, to bring this, you know, half decent sized can of soup to bring that up to a simmer will take about half an hour. So, you know, when it comes to being able to cook off even 2 meals a day, I'd be able to run this for 4 or 5 days without having to even recharge it. And that's cooking meals, you know. Obviously, you'd want to kind of keep charging it and keep things so you're not just exhausting your battery. But like I say, that's something I'll talk about in a future video. But hopefully that gives you an idea now of kind of what little batteries like this can do to really kind of amplify your abilities out in the field. And I definitely recommend going with lithium iron phosphate batteries over sealed lead acid and that kind of stuff. They hold more power, they last longer, and they're lighter. So full stop, if you're going off grid, you're wanting to do backcountry stuff, a lithium iron phosphate battery is way better option than it would be going with sealed lead acid or anything else. Now, even lithium ion batteries like the ones you get in cell phones and those kinds of things, I have solar generators that I've used in the past that are like those, and I've done review videos on those types of products. They've got a 3 to 5 year shelf life normally before that battery is gonna bag it in the end, you know. Whereas this thing, if I looked after this well and didn't kind of, you know, beat the hell out of it with charge cycles and everything else, I'd probably be able to get 15-20 years worth of use out of this battery. That's unprecedented. When it comes to off-grid and stuff, if you're using these batteries, you know, wisely, and you're using them gently and all that stuff, which all this stuff is, we're not hitting the batteries hard, you could use this well until I'm dead, probably, because I'm getting old, you know. I'd probably be able to use a battery like this until I was dead out in the field before it would run out of power. And that gives you an idea of kind of the level of functionality you can get off of just a simple, good quality lithium iron phosphate battery like the ones LiTime produces, yeah. All right there, fellow wanderers of the web. So it's been about half an hour or so, yeah, and pretty well set up for the next video that I want to put out. I'm pretty well prepared for all that, I think. But as you can see along here, getting simmering happening all through the soup here. So, and I'll just give it the old pinky test. Yeah, that's enough to scald the finger. So after about half an hour, as you can see, it's hot enough to get things up to a simmer. So, you know, when it comes to canned foods and that kind of stuff, if you're off grid and you're shipping that kind of stuff in on a regular basis and that kind of stuff, it's easy enough to kind of get it hot enough to the point where it's food safe and all that happiness, even though it's in a can. But you know what I'm saying, of, you know, relatively speaking, it's going to be good in a short period of time. And like I say, this was all just running off of this cigarette lighter adapter. There wasn't much more to it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll just unplug that because that soup's ready and I'm going to eat it. And I forgot my coffee cup, and I know this is generally a no-no when it comes to doing stuff, but you know, I'm a savage this way. I've got the can of soup that I used, and I just pulled some water out of the lake, and I just wanted to show this as kind of one additional part in the video still. I'll just shift this cable out of the way. Now, I've got the immersion heaters. Like I say, all the stuff I've talked about in previous videos, I just want to kind of do a shorter video off that kind of goes across all of it as quick as I can. So I'm just going to simply hook this immersion heater onto the edge of the can, and I'm going to just plug that in. Now that immersion heater is going, and it'll bring that water up to a boil. I just forgot my little coffee cup that I normally bring with me when I go off into the field, unfortunately. So like I say, I know that there's plastics on the inside of this can, and people are gonna whatever. I just want to be able to drink a bit of water that's safe. So, and I've got some instant pouches of coffee. I like to have these in the field too. I've talked in previous videos about doing combinations of, you know, I'm not plugging any products here in any way, but you know, these little pre-made coffee packets where they've got the cream, sugar, all that stuff into them. Normally when I go off into the field, I bring a container that has a mixture of instant coffee, sugar, coffee whitener, and hot chocolate that I pre-mix together. But the video that I'm doing separate from this one is purely just a rope craft video, so I don't plan on doing an overnight or, you know, that kind of thing, so I didn't bring a full kit with me. But I'm just going to stop now. I'm going to let this, you know, get up to the point where it's hot water and I feel like it's kill off any pathogens that could exist in the lake that I don't want in me, and I'm going to drink off my soup. So I'll cut back with some finishing scenes on this. But as you can see, this little LiTime lithium iron phosphate battery did a great job. It was able to run all this kind of stuff easily without a problem. It runs all this kind of stuff and can do it for multiple hours at a time before you even have to recharge it. So, you know, when it comes to off-grid stuff, you know, if you're wanting to kind of keep it simple, you want to do it yourself, you don't want to have it be complex, this kind of construct is probably one of the best in my mind. Like I say, just going out to a cigarette cigarette light adapter, cigarette adapter here, just going off to one of these little units allows me to plug in all this stuff with ease, you know. If I'm not really needing high levels of AC power, which normally I'm not when I'm out in the field, and I've done videos on 12-volt cooking and stuff in the past in comparison to using AC power and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of content, go back and watch some of my previous videos to see why I prefer the 12-volt over, you know, AC, you know, 12-volt DC over AC when it comes to cooking and that kind of stuff. But yeah, like I say, I'm going to wrap this video up. I'll put in a closing scene and that kind of stuff, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the show and hopefully you got something out of it. And I thought I'd just throw in this as kind of a little scene of, you can see the water immersion heater down in the can. Now I know I wouldn't recommend using soup cans. They got plastic liners and stuff around them, but you know, you make do when you have to, right? And it's just the nature of life. But yeah, I just thought I'd show that after about 15 minutes or so. Hopefully you guys can see that there's bubbles rising on a fairly steady basis off that little element that's in the water there. These things are really rapid units as well, and they use about the same amount of power as that cooking pot to give you an idea of kind of how long you'd be able to use it and all that kind of stuff, right? But one way or the other, I just don't trust drinking water out of this lake, and I'm getting thirsty, and I know I'm going to be a bit before I get back home, so it's going to be a few hours, so I need to get some water supply. So I just heat this up to make it safe, and then I'll let it cool back down again, and hopefully I'll be able to get some water into me. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. Yeah.